Plato's Allegory of the Cave. It's from the Republic, Book 7. And there are two people talking. One is Socrates, one is Glaucon. Okay. Socrates says, "And now I said, let me show in a figure how far our nature is enlightened or unenlightened. Behold, human beings living in an underground cave, which has a mouth open toward the light, reaching all along the cave. Here they have been from their childhood, and have their legs and necks chained so that they cannot move and can only see before them, being prevented by the chains from turning round their heads. Above and behind them is a fire blazing at a distance, and between the fire and the prisoners there's a raised way. You will see, if you look, a low wall built along the way, like the screen in which a marionette players have in front of them, over which they show the puppets." That's the scene, okay? So again, if you imagine a cave, imagine you're in the cave. The back of the wall is back here. We're here, looking here. Let me turn. Let's do this imagery. So here's the cave. Here's the back wall right here. And we're sitting here. And not only are we sitting here, but we're tethered together and chained. So we can't move our necks to turn. And we can't move our legs to turn. So we're tethered together and we're facing the wall of the cave. Y'all got that? Let me know if you got it. And let's say, just like in the story, we've been there since childhood, okay? And we cannot move and can only see before them. So we can only see the back of the cave, that's all. Being prevented by the chains from turning round their heads. Above and behind us is a fire blazing far back. And between the fire and us, there's a raised way, like a hill. And then there's a low wall built along the hill. This is the scene. Okay. And so you will see, if you look, a low wall built along the way, like the screen in which marionette players have in front of them, over which they show the puppets. So you know how when the puppet master has a puppet show, he uses the strings like this. So it's a pretty low wall. All right. So that's Socrates setting the stage, setting the scene. Glaucon says, "I picture the scene." Hey, Ashe. Socrates, now imagine that people walk behind the wall and carry various artifacts that extend above the wall. So the people outside the cave, they pass the mouth of the cave, okay? They carry various artifacts that extend above the wall. These artifacts include carvings of humans and other animals made of stone, wood, and other materials. Some of the people carrying these objects are talking while others are silent. Okay, so again, you have the people facing the wall. They can't turn their head, nothing like that. There's a fire in the distance. There's a wall, and then there's the people walking outside the cave. They walk across, Plato's Allegory. They walk across the mouth of the cave carrying artifacts of animals. They're carrying animals, humans, things like that, made of wood and such, right? And some of the people are talking, and some of the people are not. Let me know, so far so good? All right. Glaucon says, "You paint a strange picture and describe strange prisoners." Socrates, "They are like ourselves. Now, do you think they see anything else except their own shadows or the shadows of another, which light from the fire casts on the opposite wall of the cave?" Okay. Like ushers? Mm-mm. Like people traveling along a path carrying stuff, just walking across, walking past the cave. That's all, right? So he says, now imagine, he says, they are like ourselves. Now, do you think they see anything else except their own shadows or the shadows of another? So let me pause right there and make sure I'm painting this picture clear, because something went on and I might have said something that made you think it was like ushers. So there's the cave. There's the inside of the cave and there's the outside of the cave. The cave has an entrance. Okay, let's pretend that my little Starbucks Lego set is the cave. How about that? Okay, Jordan made this for me because she know I like Starbucks. So this is the cave. This is the opening of the cave. The people are in there and they can only look at the back wall, and that's all. There are people walking along the path outside the cave, and they're traveling, so they're carrying different statues, different ornaments of animals, peoples, etc. And they're talking, some of them, and some of them are not. So you get the picture. Now my Lego thing just came apart. I'll ever fix it. So he said, Glaucon says, let me know if you're following, you're tracking what I'm saying. Glaucon says, you paint a strange picture and you describe strange prisoners. They are like ourselves. Now, do you think they see anything else except their own shadows or the shadows of another, which light from the fire casts onto the opposite wall of the cave? All right. So Socrates says, do you think they see anything else but the shadows of the things that pass? I'm going to ask you, do you think they see anything else besides the shadows of the things that pass? The shadows cast on the wall from the things outside? Do you think they see anything else other than the shadows? Because remember, they can't turn around to see what's outside. They only face this back wall, and the shadows of the people walking by are on the back of the wall. They can't, right? So they've been there since childhood. That's all they've ever seen or known. Glaucon says, how could they see anything else if they were forced to keep their heads still for their whole life? Right. How could they see anything else if they were forced to keep their heads still for their whole life? Right. They think it's normal. So Socrates says, and what would they see of the objects that are being carried? Would they not see only the shadows of them as well? So not only do they see the shadows of the people walking, they only see the shadows of the artifacts the people are carrying. So imagine there's the shape of a horse and the shape of a dog and the shape of a camel. They only see that shadow, okay? The shadow of the people, the shadow of the artifacts. Now, Glaucon says, what else? Socrates says, and if they were able to talk to one another, would they not think that the objects of their conversation were the shadows they saw in front of them? If they were to talk to one another, don't you think they would be seeing the same shadows and talking about the same things? Yes? Would they not think that the object of their conversations were the shadows they saw in front of them? Nikki said, yes. Y'all answer the question. Come on. Let's engage. Because one thing a good teacher will do is ask you questions and cause you to self-reflect. He's using logic right here to teach spiritual and psychological ideas, right? And so Glaucon says, absolutely. That's when they talk, that's what they would talk about. Socrates. And what if an echo bounced off the opposite wall of the prison? Would they not think that when one of the passersby spoke that the voice came from the passing shadow? What if the people talking on the outside sound made it inside and echoed? Wouldn't they think the shadows were doing that? because all they've ever seen is shadows. And so when they hear sound, they would also think the shadows are making the sound. Yeah. Okay. And Glaucon says, absolutely. Definitely. Socrates says such prisoners would think that the truth is nothing but the shadows cast by the artifacts. Such prisoners would think that the truth is nothing but the shadows cast by the artifacts. They have no other point of reference. So they think the truth is the shadow. They think when they see a shape that that shadow is the thing. And we all know that the shadow is not the thing. If you see your shadow, that shadow is not you. That's an artifact of you blocking light and the light not being able to pass through your body. And so you get the outline of light and your silhouette, but your shadow is not you. And they see nothing but shadows. It's not you, it's not the thing, right? But they think the shadow is the thing. Okay, most certainly. Socrates, let's continue. Now imagine what would happen naturally if the prisoners were released from their shackles and cured of their ignorance. Right after, they are released and suddenly forced to stand up, turn their necks around, walk, and look toward the light. These activities will cause them pain. Because of the bright glare, they would be unable to see those things which they previously had seen only as shadows. The light would be too bright. They would be in pain because they've been in the dark their whole life, haven't seen an ounce of light. So even if you took the shackles off of them and allowed them to walk out toward the light, they would be in such great pain, right? Now, what do you think they would say if one were to tell them that what they saw before was fooling them, but that now they are closer to what really exists? And when they face that which more truly exists, they see more clearly in a straightforward manner. Okay? What do you think they would say if someone then told them, hello there, that this is real out here? Not that. In other words, what if you pointed to the objects outside and said, hey, you remember that shape? That was just a shadow. This is the actual thing. Don't you think they would be baffled and think that the shadows they formerly saw were truer than the objects that are now being pointed out to them? That's a question. Don't you think if you told them, hey, what you were looking at, that was just a shadow, that wasn't the thing, that's not true, this is true. Yeah, right. You see where this is going, right? Glaucon said, true, and Socrates. And if they were forced to look straight at the light, would that not make their eyes hurt? Would they not try to avoid the light and turn back to the things they can see? And would they not think that in reality the shadows are more clear than the objects they are forced to look at? Wouldn't they? Yeah. Glaucon says true. But let's continue on. But what if someone dragged them along a steep and harsh ascent against their will and did not let go until they were dragged right into the sunlight? Would they not feel pain and discomfort? Yes, no. What if you just dragged them? They wouldn't want to come, but you dragged them anyway, and you turned their head and made them look at the light, right? And he said, and if they walked toward the sun and their eyes suddenly filled with brilliant light, would they be able to see even one of those things that are now called true? Would they even be able to see? They shield their eyes. the things that are real and true, they won't even be able to see that because the light would be so bright. Okay. So Glaucon said, and his last question is, would they be able to see even one of those things that are now called true reality? And Glaucon says, no, not right away. Right. I think that, and here's Socrates, I think that if they wanted to see the objects of the upper world, they would need to grow accustomed to them. First of all, it will be easier for them to see the shadows. After that, they will see the reflections of people and other things in the water. And only after that will they see the objects themselves. After that, they will see celestial objects and the sky itself. It will be easier to see them first at night by looking at the stars and the light of the moon than during the day by looking at the sun or the light of the sun. There's steps to this and levels to it, processing, right? So Glaucon says, well, how could it be otherwise? And Socrates says, last of all, I think they will be able to see the sun and not mere reflections of it in the water or other media. They will be able to look at the sun itself directly and see it as it is. Hey, CC. Glaucon said, definitely. Socrates. Now, after making all these observations, they will conclude that it is the sun that is responsible for the four seasons and the passing of the years, and that it governs all that exists in the visible world, and that in some way the sun was even the cause of all of those things they used to see in the cave. They would draw some inaccurate conclusions because they're not used to reality. So they're still concluding. So they see the sun, they couldn't look at the sun, it was levels to it. Finally, they can look at the sun and they draw a conclusion that the sun runs everything. And Glaucon said clearly they would come to such conclusions after having made those observations. And Socrates said, what do you think then? When they recall where they used to live and the backward wisdom of that place and the fellow prisoners they once had, would they not think that this change is fortunate for them? And would they not pity those who stayed behind? So there was some who stayed behind. The light was too bright. They were like, no, this is reality. This is what feels good. Out there hurts my eyes. I can't see nothing. This is what's real. They were unshackled and everything. They went and sat back down and looked at the wall and continued to enjoy the shadows that they always have. Some were dragged out and some went out, processed, and drew some inaccurate conclusions. Socrates says, what if some honors, praise, and gifts were bestowed on them by the other cave dwellers while they were still in the cave for their superior ability to detect the passing shadows, to remember best in which sequence those shadows usually moved, which of them went before and which followed after and which moved together, and to predict how the shadows would move in the future based upon their past observations. Do you think they would care for such honors or even envy the ones who were honored and considered powerful among the cave dwellers? That's a nice question. So of the ones that stayed behind, what if someone came along and offered them honor and praise for being able to name the shadows, to order the shadows, predict the patterns and everything of the shadow? What if that was bestowed? Don't you think the ones that stood behind would want that honor too? Or have some kind of envy because they were not? Mm-hmm. Do you think they would care for such honors or even envy the ones who were honored? Yes. Or do you think they would rather choose to become servants of a poor man and endure anything rather than admire such things and live that way? Let me ask that again. Do you think they would rather choose to become servants of a poor man, to quote Homer, and endure anything rather than admire such things and live in that way. In other words, live outside where reality is or stay in. Which one do you think they would rather? The honor and staying in, or the pain and getting out? The truth is unknown and scary and painful sometimes, right? They would want to stay, yeah. Glaucon says, I think they would rather suffer anything than accept life. Socrates, now, imagine this. Imagine this. If such a person goes back down into the cave and ends up back in the same boat as the other prisoners, would her eyes not be filled with darkness after she suddenly comes out of the sun? If you go back in there and sit down, don't you think your eyes are going to have to experience complete darkness to readjust? Now you got to readjust to the darkness. Don't you think that would happen? Coming out of the bright sun, going back into the cave? Yes. Glaucon says, to be sure. Socrates. And what would happen if such a person were once again to compete against the permanent cave dwellers in judging those shadows? Remember that his sight would still be weak before his eyes once again. Wait, let me read that again. Remember that his sight would still be weak before his eyes once again got used to darkness, and the recovery time could be considerable. Would he not then become the butt of jokes? And would they not say about him that went up and went down, he came with his eyes totally destroyed, and that it is not advisable to even think of climbing up? In other words, you went into the light, your eyes adjusted, you went back into the cave, your eyes readjusted, but it's taken some time, so you can't really see the shadows too good. So they start making fun of you, and they start saying, that's why you shouldn't have went up there, because now your eyes destroyed. He says, wouldn't you think that would happen? And then they would begin to advise everyone not to go up there, because you will destroy your eyes. And listen, and if someone attempted to free another prisoner and then lead him upwards, would they not kill that leader if they could only lay their hands on him? So again, they have said it's not advisable to go up there. But you now go against what they're saying and try to bring someone else up, they will handle you. Yes, they would, right? Glaucon says, no doubt. Socrates says, now, dear Glaucon, apply this entire imagery picture to our previous discussion. The prison house stands visible for the visible world. Now he's about to break it down. The prison house stands for the visible world. The light of the fire in the cave represents the power of the sun. And you will not miss my intended meaning if you interpret the journey upward and the sight of the things that are up above as the ascent of the soul into the intelligible world. For this is what you wish to hear about. Only God knows if my attempt has been successful, but here are how things seem to me, okay? Socrates says, in the world of knowledge, the idea of good appears last of all, and we are barely capable of seeing it. However, when we do manage to see it, we conclude that it is the cause of all that is beautiful and right. It gives birth to light, and the Lord of light in the visible world. And in the intelligible world, it rules itself and is the source of truth and intelligibility. Now, anyone who intends to act prudently, either in public or private, must have their mind's eye fixed upon this idea. Glaucon says, I think I follow you as far as I can. That's real, right? Socrates says, "Come now and follow me a step farther. You should not be surprised that those who come to this place have no desire to be involved in the affairs of the cave dwellers. Instead, their souls long to remain here forever. And this is how they are likely to behave, since that is what our analogy so far has suggested." Glaucon says, yes, very likely. I think I'm gonna stop right here because we could keep going. Let's see how much longer it is. It's a lot longer. I can break this up into parts. So I'm gonna stop right there. That was good, wasn't it? The the ego will keep you in the cave. It will keep you in the cave, and you'll think that the cave is reality and it's the only reality. And you will fight people as far as many questions. And you will fight people who try to tell you that there's much more. You'll deny it. You'll say, no, no, what no. That's what it's like being in the cave. And coming into the light of truth can be painful, like a kick in the gut. But if you keep processing on and you don't try to go back where it's comfortable, because that's what feels better, then your eyes will adjust and you will go on to live a beautiful and rich life in many layers. But if you let your ego lead you, your ego is going to have you in the cave with no chains and no fetters and villainizing anyone who tries to tell you that that's not real and that's not true. Ashe. What y'all think? Talk to me about it. Right, Penny, right. It's a message. Ashe. We can give reasons why our ego is right. We could support it with this or that. But the truth is, you have sat back down in the cave when you do that. It fills you with rage. What part? What part fills you with rage? It takes courage to take a step forward in a different direction that the people around you don't know. I think it blocks some of your comment, Nikki. I think it blocks some of your comments, so I couldn't see the whole thing. I wonder what's the grand scheme. Which grand scheme? Being in the cave. Why are you in the cave? Is that it? hmm I heard an analogy given by one of my mentors before, and she said, imagine that the sink is running, the kitchen sink, and imagine this, y'all. The kitchen sink is running, and it's overflowing now. It's going on the floor. You can go in the kitchen and say, why, who turned this on? Who did this? And you could stand there while it's still pouring. Or you could turn the faucet off to stop the overflow. Get the water out of that side of the sink, open the drain, clean up the water, then think about who did it. But even so, if the person is there, no one will be able to answer. So you may never know. And I'm not saying you can't know, there's levels to it. But what I am saying is since we now know that we're in the cave, or we have been in the cave, or we're adjusting to being out of the cave, there's levels to it, you know. I think it's important to keep progressing upward into the light, to keep doing it, to keep taking steps forward, to refuse to allow your ego to take you back. Right? What I would love in this lesson for us to focus on making sure that we don't let our ego lead. Because see, the ego wants to pursue knowledge and ask why. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, you should, because I'm gonna ask why when I want to. But right now, this is the moment for embodiment. Right now, you see how we're philosophizing over this? But I want you to embody the ones that are walking out the cave. You're not being dragged. I want you to see yourself rather than why or who turned the sink on. I want you to turn the water off. I want you to embody, because the ego has an endless pursuit of knowledge and ideas and philosophies. And we should do that, because I'm a philosopher. But right now, I read that because I want you to come into embodiment. The ego will cause you to run round and round in a circle and go down a rabbit hole and miss the embodiment. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So I'm not saying don't ask why. Right. It's a loop, right? I want you to focus on I'm going into the light. You remember the movie The Matrix when Morpheus offered the red pill or the blue pill? What if I told you? That was that same kind of idea, right? Now, what pill are you going to take, right? Because I'm presenting this lesson. I'm presenting this lesson because I know someone has been saying, I'm ready for more. I have spent round and round and round on this level for a long while, and I'm still getting upset about the same things. I'm still reacting the same ways. I'm still telling the same story. And I thought it was true for a long time. But I'm ready to go to the next level of truth. There's levels and layers. Remember, we talked about once you come out of the cave, you might only be able to walk around at night. You might only be able to look at the sun in the water. But over time, one day you're going to be able to look directly at the sun, and it's not going to be painful. And even still, there's levels to it, right? So who here is ready for their embodiment of their divine self? And there's levels to it, okay? So nobody has arrived totally in their divine self, but there are levels to it, and you certainly can ascend, right? Hey, pretty lady. Yeah. Remember I told y'all like a few years ago, I had did a teaching and I said rejection is not real, and people got really upset. That was a cave situation. A lot of the things that I have said, which seem pretty simple, have gone viral because people have gotten upset. I said empaths stop absorbing. Thousands of people said they have to. I said you don't. They didn't say how, tell me. They said we have to. That's because I'm an empath. They sat back down in the cave. Right? But one thing I don't ever want to do is go all the way back in the cave and sit down and have my eyes filled with darkness. Sometimes in conversations, a person will be saying something unconscious of it, and I'll say, hey, you just said this, and this is what it means, and this is what it tells me, and they get upset. They sat back down in the cave, right? I'm not saying that anyone has to believe anything that I'm saying right away, but what you don't need to do is get upset and let your ego block a possible truth coming forward. There's an incoming possible truth, and your ego runs interference, block, before it can even make sense to you. And I know how that is because I used to do that. I had mentors and coaches and spiritual mothers and pastors who tried to tell me things. And, I said they was just trying to control me. They was just jealous. They just didn't want to let me ascend in their presence because they didn't want their people to leave them. So egoic, right? It could have been true. It could have not been true. But what I do know is it kept me in a low vibration of resentment and blame. I sat back down in the cave for a while. Even though the chains were off, I sat back down in the cave. Anytime somebody was doing something I didn't like, it's them. They're this. They think that. They. Right? It could have been true, but there was some truth that you could have learned from. Right. And the truth to learn from ever and always is what is going on inside of me in a true way, and what do I need to do about it? I don't have to create suffering to know what's true inside of me, right? I don't have to create suffering between me and another person. I don't have to villainize other people. I don't have to blame them, right? Yeah. So there's so much to be said by this, that the ego wants to talk about what's true and how it was done wrong and how they did this against me. And step one, okay, that is a step in the right direction because some people deny that something was done, right? So if you have picked up my book, Self Intimacy, there's acknowledgement first. There's understanding that something was done and it mattered. And then there's integration of truth. So if a person is at that beginning level where they have to say, well, that happened, that did happen, and it mattered, I would say ashe to that because it did, and that's true. Here's what I also know, that I've heard so many stories, okay? Not only my own stories, not only the stories of people around me, but over time in my practice, stories of people telling me what happened. I do couples coaching, couples having different stories. And one thing I know to be true, and even if you are self-aware, a lot of times your interpretations be distorted. What do I mean by that? There's some element of what you're perceiving, you're projecting it, meaning you think these ways and you think other people are thinking these ways too. You think these ways, so you think that's why they did it. You judge people, so you think they're judging. And even if they are judging, you still think like that too. And we can't stop them from doing it, but we can address what's going on in you and cause you to make some decisions for your well-being. You can have, when I was studying in school, I'll never forget the experiment that made the most sense to me was they sent two people in the same party, okay, at different times. The first person goes into the party, and the people in the party were instructed to just act mean, act like an ass toward this person. And they did. The person came out and said, I hated being in there. I don't know why they were making fun of me. What about me made them act like that? And they weren't doing that to anyone else. They were just doing it to me. Hey, 64. That's what the first person said. Y'all heard that? I just want to make sure. Okay. So then they send the second person in the exact same scenario. Hey, 64. In the exact same scenario. And that person comes out and says, what a bunch of assholes. I will never go back in there again. Something is wrong with them. Same experience, different interpretation. One absorbed it and made it about himself. What about me made them do that? They were not doing that to anyone else. And one came out and was confident that it was them that had the problem. You see where I'm going with that? And this is why I study universal truth. This is why I teach universal truth. That's why I always want to be in the practice of it whenever I'm feeling some kind of way, whenever I'm experiencing something. Because interpretations, that's what I mean when I say your interpretations are distorted most of the time. Hey, Jersey girl. I can remember being I was in the AT&T store with a friend of mine. Now this friend, we're not talking anymore, but we're still cool, right? This friend was I don't know if she still is, but was very feisty. She would fight, okay? And if you know me, I never had a fight in my life. People have not wanted to fight me. I had one instance, and that wasn't real, and my mama wound up being about to fight the girl mama. That was in the 6th grade. I never had a fight. Things don't escalate like that with me in my world. Okay. So me and the girl, we're in the AT&T store. The person behind the counter keeps looking over at us. My then friend, she's feisty. Why is she looking at me like this? She got some kind of problem? Because I'll go over there, she's telling me, and I'm like, I think you should calm down. I think she's attracted to one of us personally. No, I saw how she looked because I think she attracted to one of us. That's what I think. So she winds up leaving. She winds up leaving. And the girl behind the counter goes behind her. Is my mama in here? Is that what you just said? Let's see. Okay. So she walks out of the AT&T store. The person behind the counter follows her. And sure enough, she asked her if she could exchange numbers with her. She called me from the car and she said, I'm so embarrassed. I said, don't be embarrassed if you could help it, because you have a different thought process than I do. But you could change it. She got all upset, expended her energy and all of that, and the person just was admiring her. And that's what it looked like. It looked like admiration to me. I know what admiration looks like. Apparently, she ain't been paying attention, hadn't been paying attention, but I have. And I know what it looks like when someone is admiring in my direction. But she interpreted admiration as threat. This is what I mean when I say I know most of the time our emotions, our interpretations be distorted. Your emotions tell you about your inner world, not about the motives of others. Your emotions tell you about what you believe, not what other people believe. Your emotions tell you more about how you have come to learn how to be through your experiences than what is really going on. I'm not saying your emotions can't be on point, but a lot of times they are not. And I don't want to take that risk of being not if I know there's some additional information. Now, there's intuition, which is different from emotions. There's suspicion, which is different from intuition. A lot of people act on emotions and not intuition. They think it's the same thing because that experience has become so natural. It's instinctual. It's like an instinct. It happens so fast that they think that's intuition. And if it happens to be right, they become more cemented in it, and it becomes harder to get them out of the cave. I can remember one time I was saying to someone, I said, just because you're feeling that doesn't mean that's what's going on. Well, turned out that's what was going on. Oh, that ego flex. And it was like, I told you, and I knew it. Yep, I knew that was going on. And blah, 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 blah. Okay, so you were right. But now that you know that, how has that changed you? Okay, so follow along into the future. This person meets someone and they swear the person is doing the same thing as what I just mentioned. And I said, remember, just because you think what that's going on doesn't mean it is going on. Oh, I know it. And I've been through this too many times. I already know. And you said that the last time and I was right. I'm going to trust my instinct. I'm going to trust. Fine. It's your life. It's your world. It's your experiences. Please do trust your instinct. I don't want you to trust me because I don't want to be responsible or held responsible for any decision you make. You don't need to trust me. You do need to trust yourself, but understand that the truth did come forward and you do what you want with it. Ashe, they isolated the person and all of this, and it was some drama. And when they came back, they were like, you know what went on? This is what went on. And it was like what you said. So you're going to take a 50-50 chance that you're right every time you come into a situation? You're just going to keep gambling like that? But saying you're ready for solidarity, saying you're ready for someone solid, but you still teeter-tottering on your baggage and not knowing the difference between your suspicion and your intuition, are you going to still do that, or are you going to become more elevated in your approach to situations? Which one? That person still is doing the same thing, okay? I'm not invested in what other people do with their life. I've learned to not be invested. They could make the most rash decision, a decision I think it's not right. They could make a decision that doesn't make sense to me. As soon as I realize that they are very interested in doing the thing that they're doing, I fall all the way into honor because I want to. I want to honor their decision. Remember, I don't know if y'all remember, I was teaching not long ago on stages of change. When a person is in pre-contemplation, they do not know what they're doing or not doing is a problem. They don't know. And they will be like the people in the cave. If you try to tell them that it's a problem, they will flex, they will get annoyed and irritated, and they will say it's you, and they will do all of that stuff because to open their eyes is too painful, and the words don't even make sense to them because the frequency is different. That's the thing. Remember the tuning forks. Remember the tuning forks. So if a person is in pre-contemplation, that means they don't know that there's a problem. So you tell them there's a problem and they deny it and they blame you and such. The tuning fork is not tuning. Okay, y'all remember that? Do I need to show it again? Is there anyone new here? If you're new, I want to show you that tuning fork video. And for those of you who have seen it, already, look at it again. I don't think you ever can get too much of it. You need to remember that just because you're speaking English, yes, just because you're speaking English and the person can understand English words doesn't mean they are on the frequency of understanding. They understand it intellectually, energetically, they do not. If they're in pre-contemplation, that's the ones who have the chains on them still, and you're standing behind them telling them, hey, I know you can't turn your head very much because you got that thing around it, but I'm telling you that the things that are going across the back of this wall, those are shadows. That's not the real thing. The real thing is actually outside. And I will unlock your fetters if you want to, but I can only do it with your permission. They will call you crazy. You're the one. You just want you, because they want to keep looking at the shadow. And you gotta let them. Because it's their divine right to create their reality the way that they want to. And remember, in the Matrix, I always say this because it's so relevant. Remember, Morpheus said to Neo when they went back into the simulation, he said, some of these people, basically, some of these people are not ready to come out of the Matrix. And if you try to take them out prematurely, they will turn against you. And they will fight you for it. And that's why you can't just keep beating the horse. You can't, they say you could lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, and you shouldn't. It's not their time. That's why you have to create your reality and decide what frequency you want to be on and what level you want to be on, and go regardless. In honor. Go in honor, though. Don't go resentful, upset, offended because they didn't listen. They don't have to listen to you. They don't listen to their own intuition. They can't even hear it. So if they don't listen to you and they chose to sit back in the cave, I shade to that choice. Here's the tuning fork video. Pretty lady, you still there? So what you're going to see is there's two tuning forks. One is 500 some hertz. One is 440 hertz. When he hits the 500 some hertz, the second tuning fork, the frequency is lower, so it won't move. But when he gets identical tuning forks, one vibrating will cause the other to vibrate too. In other words, they cannot hear you when they are on another frequency, and you have to learn to tell when someone is not on a frequency to hear you. It's a spiritual practice, it's a daily practice. I used to think that if you just keep saying it and saying it many different ways, they will get it, because you think it's an intellectual thing. That if you say it this way and you say it that way and you say it this way, and for some people, yes, they will get it like that. But you're saying it all different ways and they're getting more intense against you. That's when you know you're not on the same frequency. You're going round and round and round. You're not on the same frequency. Okay, here it goes. It's not moving. When the frequency was higher, the lower resonance would not respond. Okay? When he lowered the tuning fork and hit it, then both were able to vibrate together that could preach. You think that the person in front of you is a particular way and you're having some emotional reaction because you're not like them in some kind of way, you may be on the opposite pole of the same spectrum. And that is why when they do what they do, you do what you do inside, because you are a like tuning fork, and there's no way to get around that. So even if you blame them, even if you say it's them and not you, you're still having a reaction, you're vibrating. You're polarized, in other words. And as long as you don't see that, you will not be able to evolve beyond the things that bother you. Whenever something bothers you, me, or anyone else, it's because the resonance is there. That's why the other day we were talking about dating, and some people said only alignment, and I said alignment and resonance. You got to know what you resonate with in your light and in everything in between, because if you're not careful, you will be resonating on a lower frequency thinking you're not there. And that's the worst part to me, being on a low frequency and not knowing it. It's one thing to be on a low frequency and you know it because you know, like, oh yeah, I know I be doing that. I'm working on that. You could change what you know. What y'all talking about? Let me see. It won't affect you. Right. Or if it does, it's not going to be causing you to get all wild and out of control. You're going to feel a little, It might even start the vibration. Y'all ever had a singing bowl? So if you hit it on the side, I'm about to get one so I can show you. If you hit it on the side, this is another analogy, it's going to vibrate. But if I put my hand on it, it'll stop the vibration, right? So I want you to see yourself like that singing bowl, okay? You used to be like the tuning fork. They vibrate, you match the vibration and say you're not matching it. You say it's them, it's y'all, okay? But I want you to be like the singing bowl. Hold on, let me get one. I just knocked down my plant. Okay. I actually knocked down one before I went live and another one, they must have been ready to go. All right. So watch this. That's you now. You are no longer the tuning fork where they come up with their vibration and you start matching it. You might feel a little like this. You gone as soon as you can. Eventually, they won't have this anymore and it won't matter. Now you just be sitting pretty, not worrying about them in that area. Not control it, deactivate that ego and whatever activates it. Because some people walk around controlling emotions only to pop off with people that they don't need to pop off with. So this is not about control. This is about self-mastery, about purifying the inner parts, purify what causes it. Go and get it at the root. Remember, I was talking about parenting earlier today, and I said punishment is the least effective way to change behavior. So it's just trying to control it. Okay? Because when your will is low, when you're tired, when you're vulnerable, when you're hungry, you're going to go back to that behavior. Your will is only as strong as your drives, okay? So this is about purifying and practicing virtue daily in every situation, no matter what. You catch yourself in some kind of past oriented energy that you know is part of the you that used to be on that timeline. You must make a conscious decision that that is not for me anymore. This is for me. You must choose ye this day. And if you choose the one from back there, then you're going to make it more difficult for yourself to come forward because you are reactivating and strengthening that circuit. Okay? So again, I want you to picture yourself just like this. You come in and you go, is that true? Your ex coming from the back and the front and side to side talking about, hey, big head. That old craving that you got over and you made a new step the other day. Whatever that person said that in the traffic that was bothering you and you was about to flip on the bird. I'm very comedic right here. Thank you. Do y'all want to sit back in the cave? Don't sit back in the cave. You've been outside. You have seen the light. You might not have been able to see everything, but you don't need to sit there looking at shadows. That's not living. This was so good. Ashe Penny, I'm glad that you were here.